Good afternoon. Well, we'd like to go ahead and get started with our fourth of our series of our Lunch and Learn programs from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So I'd like to welcome all of you and all of you that are online watching also. So thank you for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn. Our topic is mental health and surviving grief. It's one that touches all of us, whether personally, professionally, or through the people that we care about. Today we will hear from four incredible panelists who bring diverse perspectives, clinical expertise, community leadership, lived experience, and so on. Our goal is to have a real conversation, one that acknowledges the importance of mental health, the pain of loss, but also highlights hope, connection, and resilience. So it's my pleasure to now introduce our panelists. I'm going to read brief portions of their bio because they all have significant bios. They've been doing the work and engaged in community for a long period of time. So I'll give them an opportunity to also add in a little bit that we don't put in here. So first of all, to my left, my immediate left, we have Brenda Johnson. She was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio for most of her life, graduated from Zane Trace High School in Chillicothe, Ohio. Brenda resides on the Hilltop, which is the west side of Columbus, where she and her husband of 38 years raised her kids and is currently raising a grandchild. Brenda has a total of 3 children and 9 grandchildren. Brenda worked in a nursing home for 8 years before going to Nationwide Children's Hospital. She retired from Nationwide Children's Hospital 11 years ago to be a stay-at-home grandma. Brenda currently works for Columbus Police Homicide Unit as a victim witness assistant, supporting families of homicide victims. Brenda Johnson is the West Side leadership for Mothers of Murdered Columbus Children. Brenda is certified in mental health first aid. She just completed a certification in advocacy with the Attorney General's office, and Brenda will be attending an advocacy training certification for SARNCOS next week. So please put your hands together for Brenda Johnson. Our next panelist is attorney Stephanie Mitchell. Stephanie Mitchell Hughes, that is a longtime attorney and assistant director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, better known as NAMI, the Franklin County affiliate. She is also a certified peer recovery supporter. Stephanie has lived with depression and what she describes as generous episodes of suicidal thinking for more than 46 years. She writes and speaks about living with mental health conditions, resilience, well-being in the legal profession, navigating change amid disruption, and healthy workplaces. Her articles appear in print and online publications such as The Medium and the Good Men Project. Please put your hands together for attorney Stephanie Mitchell Hughes. Next we have Carrie Werrick. She's the director of Crisis Hotlines. Carrie has 35 years in the mental health and substance abuse treatment field. She got her master's degree in rehabilitation counseling from Bowling Green State University. Carrie is a licensed professional clinical counselor and a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor in the state of Ohio. She has worked as a substance abuse and mental health counselor in community mental health, hospitals, private practice, managed care, and crisis centers. She has been in management for over 25 years. In her current work, she directs a high-volume crisis hotline, which is 988 Center, and the homeless hotline. Please put your hands together for Carrie Werrick. And last but not least, we have Dr. Shannon Porter. She's a licensed and board-certified forensic psychologist in Columbus, Ohio. She completed her graduate training at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, where she earned a doctorate in clinical forensic psychology with a specialization in law enforcement. She is currently the director of forensic and specialized assessment services at NetCare Forensic Center, an agency responsible for conducting court-ordered evaluations for 10 counties in the state of Ohio. In addition to her position at NetCare Forensic Center, Dr. Porter conducts a variety of forensic assessments through her private practice, Expert Evaluations, LLC. Please welcome Dr. Shannon Porter. So thank you all for being here, and I'm not sure if I've missed anything, but if I have, I want to give each one of you, though, an opportunity to maybe expand upon what you're all about, but maybe some areas that we can talk about here, throughout the conversation. And I'll start with you, Brenda, since you have the microphone.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brenda Johnson. I'm with I'm the West Side Leadership for Mothers of Murder Columbus Children. The founder of Mothers of Murder Columbus Children is Melissa Thomas St. Clair, who lost her son Anthony to homicide, and the co-founder is Carla Harris. She has not lost a child, but she is a supporter and a ex-student of Melissa. Um, like you said, I have 3 kids and 9 grandchildren. I lost my only son in October of 2020. His anniversary date is coming up. His case is unsolved. He was a father of 6 of those 9 grandchildren, one of which I raised. I've had her since she was a baby, but her dad was the only parent in her life, all of her life. And so with the mental health aspect, I've watched my granddaughter go through a lot of changes as well as all my other grandkids, but that's when we decided to start our own little organization called What About Us for the Children of Homicide. And we give free grief counseling to any children who has suffered a loss. It doesn't have to be homicide, but our kids grieve and we think they're going to be resilient and be okay, but that's not always the case. She's been in therapy since her dad's homicide, and I know how important it is. And so I wanted to make it available for free with Starks Counseling. So that's my new project I'm working on. But like you said, I'm very active in the community with Mothers of Murder Columbus Children to stop the homicides. We started an initiative called Under Triple Digits, and because we haven't had homicides under 100 since 2013, this is our 2nd year of this initiative, and so far, I mean, 1 is too many, but so far we're doing okay. We're at 61, I believe. So that's my goal right now and my life's mission.
Great, thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome.
I guess one of the things that I would like for everyone to know is the work about NAMI. There are 2 things. NAMI is the national, as you said, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the largest grassroots organization in the country. We are not clinicians, we are peers, meaning that the people who do this work, the people who work for NAMI, the people who provide the services, facilitate support groups, teach classes, they all will have not just the training to do that, but also the lived experience that correlates with the class or the support group that they facilitate. And one of the other things is that our services are free of charge. So I would invite you to go on our website, namifranklincounty.org. If you want to learn more information, if you would like to learn more about a support group meeting that you could attend, or learn about the different classes that we teach. We also have another program that we developed called Faith Link, and that is a program where we will go into a church or house of worship if leadership has invited us, and for the individuals who are members of that church, if they are interested in having a counselor, we will assign a counselor to that particular house of worship for a period. I think that it is now 3 to 6 months. And during that time, counseling, we pay for out-of-pocket expenses that are associated with that service. Now, the one other thing that I just want to leave you with is every NAMI has to be self-sustaining. And so we get our own funding for our programs. And everything that we do, unless it's a NAMI signature program, is contingent upon available funding. So if you want to know more about what NAMI does, you're interested in what our specific services are, I'm happy to elaborate.
Thank you. Ms. Carey?
Thanks. I'm so glad that I'm here with such a esteemed group of folks. I just want to mention in my work in mental health, I've referred people to your organization, and I've referred a lot of people to NAMI. One thing that I believe NAMI still does is the family-to-family trainings. It's really important for family members to learn about mental illness, because for the everyday person, it doesn't make sense, and we try to, for an everyday person who's not in the field, you just try to figure out what's wrong with them. Oh, they're stressed out, or oh, it's a spiritual crisis, or you know, come up with other explanations. Oh, they're just different, or whatever. But it's really important to learn about what mental illness is. And there's nobody better than NAMI in helping families learn about how to help their family member than that. But I can talk a little bit about NetCare and what NetCare does. I've been at NetCare for 19 years now. NetCare operates hotlines. We operate the homeless hotline. We operate 276 CARE, which is our crisis hotline. And then we also are an agency that answers 988. And just so you kind of have an understanding about NetCare's hotlines, and of course, they're my babies, so I'm very proud of them. So we help about 600 people a day, 24/7, either over 988 texts, 988 chats, or 988 phone calls, or people calling the homeless hotline or our 276 CARE phone number. So we've got social workers and counselors all over the state working from home answering our hotlines. Another thing that NetCare offers is we have a crisis stabilization unit, and we have a mobile crisis team. This might be really helpful for you folks in your work here or at home. If you're concerned about someone with a mental illness, you can call either 988 or 276 CARE and talk to our trained clinicians about how to help them. We can have our mobile crisis team go out and meet them directly. We can, if they're unable or unwilling to seek out treatment for themselves and they're putting themselves at risk or others at risk, we have a probate pre-screen department that can file if the magistrate approves, and they could be involuntarily evaluated. But that's the worst case scenario. We really would rather talking to the person and having them seek help out on their own. But those services, our mobile crisis team is available 24/7. It's for all of Franklin County, and you just get that by calling 988 or 614-276 CARE. We also have a crisis stabilization unit, which is a it's like an inpatient psychiatric unit, except everybody is there voluntarily, and it's not a locked facility. And we're at 199 South Central, so we're over in the Franklinton area, and folks can stay there a week or so, get started on meds, and if they don't have a good plan for going back out into the community, maybe they don't have a house, a place to live, they can go to Miles House, which is in the Hilltop, and at Miles House they can stay for up to 2 weeks. So we've really got a good, what we call a continuum of care. NetCare used to offer walk-in services, and now we don't. Instead, that's a Franklin County Crisis Care Center out on Harmon Avenue, but we work very closely with those folks. So, and Dr. Porter here works for our forensic department at NetCare, and maybe she wants to talk about that.
Thank you. Yeah, Carrie covered many of the services we offer. I am at the Forensic Center where we do court-ordered psychological evaluations. We conduct a variety of evaluations, but the one I was really hoping to talk about today that I think is underutilized with, for folks with mental health issues is called intervention in lieu of conviction. And this is where typically we get referrals related to substance use, and that is one of the possible categories, but so is mental illness, intellectual disability, or being the victim of human trafficking. And if it's found that one of those was a factor in the alleged offense, they have the opportunity to participate in treatment for whatever their needs are, and eventually not have a felony on their record. So there are some rules in place for that. I believe it can only be used once. It isn't, you don't qualify for like higher felony degrees, violent felonies. But for a lot of the referrals we get, it would be very appropriate to refer for an intervention in lieu of conviction. And again, the criteria is just whether mental illness or any of those other factors played a role in the offense.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that baseline of where we're at and where each one of you are. I would like to start off this next piece with the story. And Ms. Johnson, you alluded with losing your son. Could you walk us through that story? So and then the impact, and then we're talking about grief and how you have been able to go forward from that.
Well, my day was a normal day. My husband woke me up on October 20th, 2020, with a cup of coffee to get my granddaughter off to school. So when he woke me up, he said, "Brenda, look at here." And on the news was, man shot at the Sunoco, 2281 Sullivan Avenue, drove himself to the UDF, where that was the second crime scene, where he was then sent to Grant Hospital and pronounced deceased, family not notified. So I just said to my husband, not knowing it was my son, I said, "Oh my God, James, somebody lost their baby this morning." So my day went on. I got my granddaughter up for school, took her to school, and I have a Ring doorbell. Well, on my way home, there was two men at my door, kept ringing my doorbell, kept ringing it, banging on my windows, and so I thought it was just some businessman trying to sell something. So I got on my Ring camera and I said, "Can I help you?" And they said, "Yeah, are you Brenda Johnson?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And they said, "Are you home?" I said, "No, I'm on my way home." And they said, "Well, we'll wait." So I get home and I pull in, once again, still thinking they're just trying to sell something. And when I walked up on my porch, they asked me again, "Are you Brenda Johnson?" I said, "Yes, I am." They said, "Your son's name is James Johnson." And I said, "Yes." And they pulled out a picture and they said, "Is this your son, James Johnson?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And they said, "Well, we hate to inform you, but your son was murdered this morning." So I immediately knew that mama that lost her son that morning was me. Since his homicide, obviously I didn't know what to do, and my main concern was making sure my daughters and my grandchildren was okay. So I kind of put myself to the side a lot just to make sure they were all right. They suffered. My granddaughter that I raise has had a lot of mental health issues. She's been suicidal. This is hard. So I, of course, seeked counseling for her right away. She's been in counseling since it happened pretty much, and now she does group counseling. She's doing okay now. She's very active in sports and in school, but it's an ongoing battle with her. I also have a grandson who kind of went through similar things. It wasn't my son's son, it was my daughter's son. So he's also been in counseling and into this grief group. But on August 21st of 2021, I saw where there was this mom's group that was doing a march downtown. So that's when I got some friends and family together and said, let's go support these moms, not knowing anything about the group. Well, we made posters of my son, and we go there to support. Well, one of the moms found out I was a mom, and she threw me into the parade. Her name was Jackie. She threw me into the parade, and that's when I joined Mothers of Murdered Columbus Children. We are a community organization that, like, we just, collaborate with other community organizations and CPD, doing what we can to try to get these homicides down and support families and be there for the other moms. I've been to court with some of the moms. I fight for unsolved homicides. That's my passion because my son is unsolved. So I have partnered with Crime Stoppers and CPD, and we did do a billboard project in honor of my son for unsolved homicides on the Hilltop and Linden area. And there was billboards of all unsolved homicides throughout the city of them. It's not going right now, but we're hoping to get it going again because it did draw a lot of attention. Also, I go to prisons with some of the moms and speak to prisoners and hopefully change their mind for when they get out. And we've had a lot of good response there. I go to schools and speak to children about, be careful who you pick for your friends and who you trust because not everybody is your friend. So we do a lot of stuff like that. And like he said, I work for CPD. That's a new position. It's called a 480 position. And I speak to families of homicide. At first, I thought it was going to be hard. And they was trying to be nice to me and give me just the nice families, but I know how it is to be angry and to want to yell at somebody or to cry. So I told them, please give me all families. And even though some days are hard and I have to walk, take a walk afterwards, I think it's kind of therapy for me too. Just knowing, and then it helps them knowing that they're talking to someone that actually knows how they feel instead of just someone on the other line that doesn't know. Yeah, I think that's about all.
No, thank you for that. I know your story, and I've heard it, and it's impactful to say the least. But it's good to hear that you have, continued to push forward and not only keeping your son alive in the minds of others, and also hopefully to find that person who did that. But then secondly, also helping others through what you have gone through. So that says a lot about you, but also that you are continuing to help others in your son's name. So hopefully that comes to conclusion there. Putting pain to purpose. All right. So let's move on to the attorney, Stephanie Mitchell here, because you mentioned being an attorney, but also, you have suffered through depression. And could you talk a little bit about that and how you have continued to work and doing what you do as an attorney there, but also as I was assistant director of NAMI?
Yes. So, as I've said, I've lived with depression and I've lived with suicidal thinking for a long, long time. And this is just to give some perspective. So, the first episode of depression that I can recall, and I've probably lived with depression since I was a young child, but the first episode of depression that I recall experiencing happened when I was 15 years old. So just to give you some context, I was 15 in 1978. Now, probably most people here were probably not even born in 1978, but I was 15 then. And at that time, mental health hospitals were still open. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, and Longview State Mental Health Hospital was an institution in Cincinnati. I can recall driving past it many times. If my family, if we were going somewhere, it was on either side of a very long street in Cincinnati called Paddock Road. Just to also give you some context, I believe this was 1972. George McGovern, then Senator George McGovern, was running against Richard Nixon. And the first running mate who he chose was very shortly, he resigned from the ticket because it was publicized that he had been treated for depression. And that's just how bad and how stigmatizing it was. But at the time, and I led a very charmed life as a kid. And so I certainly, at 15, living in the suburbs of Cincinnati, did not have language to go to my parents and say to them, I'm depressed. I don't even know if at the time I fully appreciated what depression was. And if I had gone to them, like most parents, and parents would probably even still do this today, they would have said, well, what is it that you have to be depressed about? Which maybe is not always a helpful question, but it certainly is I would think, a reasonable response. And so I think it was somewhat intuitive for me that I had to learn how to save myself, if you will. I had to learn how to anticipate when these real periods of that I described as heaviness would just sort of settle upon me. What would cause those things to happen? What would I be doing, or what would be happening with me when these things would come? And then how to quickly escape. And that served me well throughout college, throughout law school, as a very young lawyer. You know, you anticipate, you sit with that, and then you get out before I get stuck. Because I know what getting stuck meant. You know, getting stuck meant, okay, I'm going to have I'm going to become suicidal, because I had experienced that too. And all that was all fine and everything, and then until 2006. And in 2006, I had what I call a sea-changing event. And that event revealed that I had been deeply depressed for at least a decade, and I didn't know it. Now, at that point, when you're living with depression and you don't know that you are depressed, the depression that I encountered in 2006 at 43 or 42 years of age, 44 years of age, was raging beast, just a beast. And that was going to require a completely different level of treatment. And in the years preceding that, at 30, I got married, I had kids, I was learning, still in that period of learning, practicing law, really becoming very proficient at it on a day-to-day basis. And in looking back, I realized, okay, I've been sort of swimming in half Jello. Not there, but not all the way there. You know, and I oftentimes have described it as falling into a pit. I brought my children down in the pit. I remodeled. I added rooms. I furnished it. That's how long I was down there. And so I was not going to be able to quickly get out because I was stuck. And I also have a suicide voice that lives in my head. And at the time, because my depression was not treated and had been untreated for such a long time, it used to tell me every single day to end my life, every day. Now, at the time, I also became my children's only parent for all intents and purposes. And I don't have family in Columbus. So there would be days where I knew, because I knew enough at that point about the mental health system, that I could have gone to a hospital. But my children in 2006 were 12 and 7. They had already been through a lot. And so there was just no way that I felt that I could leave them and go to a hospital. Because what if someone else decided that I was a danger to myself? If I go into a hospital and I tell someone that I have a suicide voice, they are going to keep me. And that would have been really traumatizing to my kids. My situation was even more complicated because at the time I did not have health insurance. So I had an internist who was handling my care at that point, and she put me on one medication, and that medication, it was almost like if you flick water on a very hot grill. It was like, lights are starting to sort of flicker and come back on. I could kind of sense that, and it gave me about 6 or 7 good days a month. Well, I don't like taking medication. I absolutely hate taking medication for any reason. And so part of my way of coping was always to figure out, well, how am I going to be able to get out of taking medication? So I would take it, even though it only gave me 6 or 7 good days a month. I would take it, I would feel better, I would go off. Well, that's dangerous. You can't, it can trigger a physical reaction. And then when I would easily slip back into that depression. I think I was still probably depressed trying to work my way to recovery, but I would fall back in that, and I would be like just all of this going on in my brain and in my mind. And so eventually, my internist basically bottom lined me one day. I'd been doing this going on, off, and all of that for months. And in order to get myself back from the edge, what I would do is instead of going to the hospital, I would get in my car and I would just drive and drive and drive and cry and drive until I could get myself together enough to go back home and pick up the role that I had, which was mom, provider, and all of the other things that I did. But it came a point where the internist asked me how many more times I was going to do this to myself. Because in doing it to myself, I was also doing this to my children. Because I could not fully be their mother and be the person who could think clearly and make good decisions for all of us, decisions that they needed. So for whatever reason, in that instance, it sort of crystallized for me. And I just started taking my medication. It was not, I was not in at that point, a strong place of recovery. I was still in a very vulnerable space, but I certainly was not the person who, in 2006, could not even sort laundry. To be so depressed that you cannot sort laundry and figure out what you need to, just there's different stories and things that I've written about. And so by 2013, I had a chance, an opportunity to speak at TEDx Columbus. I was well enough mentally and emotionally to begin telling different parts of my story. And after I did TEDx Columbus, I thought about it and I just thought, no one should ever spend one day, let alone at least a decade of their life depressed and not knowing it. Life is too short. And I also felt, even though I'm not and was not normally a person who would step out and just say, okay, well, let me tell you what happened to me. I just felt that because I had come so far, because I was still alive, I had a responsibility to help other people. So I started writing and speaking and talking about resilience and talking about living with a mental illness and talking about having a suicide voice and all of those things. It doesn't mean that everything, like I still don't struggle. I still don't have days because I take antidepressants and antidepressants have to be managed by a psychiatrist or an advanced psychiatric nurse practitioner. And if you are in the field, you know that there is a huge shortage of psychiatrists across this country. And in one instance over these many years, just to show you just how bad it is, the second psychiatrist who I had retired. And at the time, I'm on my medications. They're working pretty well, not really any problem. And I tried finding another psychiatrist, and I couldn't find one. And I tried and tried and tried for almost 5 years and still could not find it. I would call, get really frustrated, and all of that. And then in 2016, I had a major mental health crisis. And fortunately, by then I did have health insurance, and I also had a therapist and some other things that I was not so fragile. But it took almost 2 weeks for me to find a psychiatrist. And so, today I work really hard to try to keep myself grounded, to do the things that I know that I need to do to take care of myself, like take my medication as prescribed, tell people, the people who care for me, I have to tell them the truth, and be ultimately responsible for my own mental health care. So there's always a question that I ask, but I won't do that now. If we have more time, I will.
We can get to it.
Yeah, there's a question that I always like to ask people when I tell my story. So, but I'll stop here.
So no, thank you for that. And often we some of us look at depression like, you're just depressed, and it's not a big thing, not a big to do. But for some of us, we don't even know we have depression, first of all. But then secondly, how it can truly impact your life, right? So that is a journey that I know many people don't make it through. So we're glad that you are continuing to work on that, though, too. So turning to Ms. Carrie Wyrick, you're taking these calls, night and day. Tell us, does this sound familiar, first of all, both these stories, and then how do you do? And also, by taking the calls, is this something that is happening often? That, how many calls are we getting and that type of information?
Well, it's interesting because when I first started working in crisis work, the standard of care was if someone was suicidal, we would put them in the hospital. We would call the police. And that was terrible. And so it encouraged people not to disclose that they were suicidal because of the very things, the stigma, the very things, what's going to happen to my kids, what's going to happen to my job. People are going to think I'm sick in the head. People are going to, it was terrible. But things have changed. Now we've discovered that the more people talk about their symptoms, talk about their grief, talk about their depression, the more that helps the symptoms reduce. And so, and isolation is what depression wants. If depression could want you to do something, depression wants you to isolate. Grief wants you to isolate because it's just overwhelming. I appreciate you talking about the laundry. I've also heard people talk about being overwhelmed on the highway, overwhelmed in Kroger in the cracker aisle, not being able to pick which crackers. Who cares which crackers you get? But it just being overwhelmed with the smallest choices and feeling like there is something wrong with me. I am a bad person and I need to hide this because something worse will happen if I don't hide it. Well, what we're finding now and what we're finding through 988 is talking about it actually helps. Talking about how people think about life, they also think about death. And that suicidal thoughts are not a sign that we need to call the police. That can make things worse. It can make things so much more dangerous, can affect somebody's lease, their landlord, can affect a lot of terrible things. Let's let the police do their police work. And when folks can talk to someone who cares and doesn't judge them and encourages them to talk it out, it can really help the person get to some help. So yes, we get calls all the time, calls and texts from folks who are thinking about suicide because they've had a bad day, bad year, had significant losses in their lives. They feel like, is life worth living today? Some people who've had trauma as children, because life started out so scary, then it's every day thinking, is this something I want to do today? Do I want to live today? So what we do over the phone or over the text or in our treatment services at NetCare, we help folks figure out what is the one thing that keeps you going? What helps lift it just a little bit, or maybe not lifting it, but making your back stronger so that you can bear that load. And inside of every individual who's thought about suicide, there's a part of them that wants to live and a part of them that's afraid of living. So the way to help them is to connect them to someone who cares. And that's huge, and you can do that even without being a professional. You can do that as a peer. You can do that as a friend, just asking someone, how you doing? Are you okay? It looks like you're having a rough day. You know, that makes a huge, huge difference. So.
Thank you so much. So that connection, you're providing that connection,
Yes.
first of all, of a human being.
Yes.
Secondly, help guide them
Right.
to the next steps.
Guide them to the next steps, figure out a safety plan, figure out a way to talk to other people about what's going on with you. Because guess what? You're not alone. Other people have gone through this too. And you may not have thought, well, that person isn't weird or that person isn't a bad person. And when they share, if you get in a group with other people like you, you can experience, oh, I think they're okay, so I must be okay too.
You lose. One of the things that I found, and I didn't start this way or for this reason, but putting words on the page, it causes it to lose its power, the thoughts to lose their power. It is amazing when that happens. I remember the day that I realized that I could not hear my suicide voice anymore. I couldn't hear it. And it just occurred to me, I thought, well, I don't hear it. And mentally I kept thinking, well, where did it go? And I'm mentally searching, well, where did it go? Why is it silent? but it's amazing the way that happens.
Well, what has probably happened is it's gone from the fear center of your brain
Right.
to the rational part of your brain. And by putting it in words, either sharing and talking to other people, or writing it down in a journal, or talking to a trusted professional, you're airing it out, you're processing it from just the emotional, non-thinking part of the brain to the rational. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Werrick. And let me move on down to Dr. Porter, because being when I called, it was the first time I ever heard of a forensic psychologist. So if you could explain a little bit about that, what that is, and then also let's talk about things that you've heard so far, and you mentioned in regards to the court-ordered psychological exam. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, a forensic psychologist is anyone who applies psychological principles to the legal system. That's kind of the broad definition. At NetCare Forensic Center, we are only doing those court-ordered psychological evaluations. So people can be referred for competency evaluations. Sanity evaluations are another common one that we get, not guilty by reason of insanity. I mentioned the ILCs earlier, and I want to talk about the connection there. Folks who are suffering from mental illness and who engage in crime may come our direction for multiple reasons. One of those is we may get an evaluation for not guilty by reason of insanity. Ohio's law is very, very strict, though, for that plea. So it has to you have to be able to show that you didn't know what you were doing was wrong. There's a whole other group of individuals who are experiencing mental illness where it was a factor in their crime. It may have caused the crime. They would not necessarily qualify for not guilty by reason of insanity, but they could certainly benefit from treatment. And that's where the intervention in lieu of conviction evaluation would be helpful, is recognizing that these are individuals who are not going to benefit from jail or prison. They need help dealing with their mental illness or with substance use or a number of other life circumstances. And that ultimately is going to get them out of the legal system and not recidivating more so than any sort of jail or prison sentence.
So, well, and let me continue though with that line. How often are your services used? I mean, do you see, especially with the environment that the world gets that much tougher and things are happening, do you find that the court is now sending more folk your way, or that you're having to deal with? And what do you see? Is there a common theme of I don't know if there's types of mental illness. Do you see any of that?
We do about 700 to 800 evaluations a year. And like I said earlier, we do various different types of evaluations. I do feel like the intervention in lieu of conviction, like I said earlier, that's sort of underutilized. But we're seeing everything from depression to psychosis. Somebody who is hallucinating or has a delusional belief that plays a role in the crime that they're committing would be the type of individual who is referred to us for an evaluation.
So now, do you take other than court referrals? Does NetCare do you take other referrals? I mean, not just from the court, but others outside of.
Definitely, Carrie can speak to that aspect of NetCare. At the Forensic Center, we only serve the court-ordered ones, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have an outpatient program that I didn't mention before. And when you're talking about getting access to professional counseling, social workers, prescribers, nurse practitioners, that kind of thing, we do have availability. We just started our outpatient program a couple years ago, and it is a certified community behavioral health clinic. So it's a CCBHC, and we have it's kind of unusual in that when you get in, you meet with your counselor, case manager, and prescriber all on the same day. So we try really hard to make it accessible, provide transportation, all of those things, because we know that in outpatient world, there's just not enough access. Unfortunately, psychiatry is one of the lowest paid specialties, and so dermatology is like the highest paid specialty. But there aren't enough psychiatrists and nurse practitioners going into psychiatry, but it's our mission to help folks. And, you know, being in the business for as long as I have, people say, oh, don't you get tired of hearing all these sad stories? It's like, absolutely not. I get to see people get better all the time. And we experience that in a 30-minute phone call. We experience that in an hour and a half text with someone. We experience that in outpatient. We experienced that with somebody who stayed with us for a couple weeks at Miles' house. We get to see people get better, and that is such a privilege because for having such a stigma, I mean, you know, if you have asthma, your lungs aren't working right. We don't blame you for your asthma. Why do we blame people for their mental illness? If your brain isn't working right, let's get it fixed.
Yeah. And we're going to ask if the audience has any questions here in just a little bit, so prepare your questions if you have some. So, you know, when we talk about mental health, you talk about therapy, and often, you know, people don't want to go to therapy or don't want to be seen going to therapy. How can we make that initial step easier or more approachable for persons to seek therapy, you know, from wherever? But do you have ways that might make that first step easier?
I think the young folks are more amenable to the idea than the young whippersnappers. They're okay with it. My generation, a little bit older, there's kind of more stigma with it. But I think normalizing it, talking about how therapy helps. And it's not just therapy, it's medicine sometimes. And it can be self-help groups. It can be all of those things. It can be going to AA. It can be all of those things that are available to you. But I don't know if you guys have some ideas on that.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
You are so right. The stigma is so much better now. But my son, he suffered from bipolar depression, ADHD, and he was autistic. He had Asperger's. But because of the stigma back then, he begged me not to tell my family that he had it because he didn't want them to think he was, in his words, you know, stupid or retarded. I didn't tell anybody. They just thought he was bad. So my family really didn't have much to do with my son. But, and actually when he passed away, well, when he was taken from us, we was at the funeral, and I don't even know what brought it. One of my niece's children has autism, and that's when the conversation came up. And I told them then my son had Asperger's and he was autistic and all these other things, and they didn't even know. They were all surprised. They said, well, he acted normal for the most part, but that's the whole stigma of it all. But he hid a lot of his pain, and he didn't like the medication. So many times he would stop taking it and telling me it made him feel weird, and I would tell him that's because it's equaling your brain, and you're not used to that. You're used to it being all over the place. So I always encouraged him to take it, and it didn't always work my way, but he tried his best. So when people talked about him, I would always say, y'all have no clue how much that boy struggled. And to be honest, he did really well for all the mental health issues he had to deal with.
The one thing that I would say that helps is storytelling. There's a quote from an organization called This Is My Brave. This Is My Brave brings people together to tell their stories, talk about their experience with mental illness, whether it's a person who actually has the mental illness or a family member. But storytelling, you think about all of the people who are out there who have stepped forward and talked about going to get therapy. You've got Michael Phelps. You look at him and all of his accomplishments as a swimmer and all of the gold medals that he's won, but he talks about his own mental health conditions and getting therapy. And I think that the conversation, being able to tell your story and listening to other people's stories, I think that is huge in extinguishing stigma and shame. So I think that when you bring light into a situation, that darkness that scatters.
So, last question from me, and then I'll turn it over to the audience. And this is for all of you, how do cultural or generational differences influence how people experience and express grief? What have you seen?
Well, I think it's like you were saying. So I have a millennial and I have a Gen Z. And the way I describe millennials is that they're well-mannered, but they're like, this is where, but they're very upfront and open. And Gen Z is, I've seen everybody deal with this situation long enough, and this is what I'm going to do, and I don't really care if you like it. And they don't, it's like all niceties are out the window. But I think that I'm just reminded of one of the incidents that's occurred that shows that difference. So I grew up in the generation raised by people who, first of all, we don't tell our business outside of the house. What happens in the house stays in the house. And the other thing is I can remember my mother and my grandmother. If someone had a mental illness, they were behaving differently, they would say, oh, he's touched. And, they're touched. So you fast forward to me, and I decide, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to start telling my story because I don't really have anything to lose. At that point, I'd been a lawyer for 26 years. For me, the die was cast, and I felt like I had a responsibility. And so I wrote about and have written about crises that I've had. And one of the ones that I wrote about was a crisis that I had in 2016. Well, I posted it, the fact that I was in a crisis and that I was suicidal, and I posted it in my Facebook community. And when I posted it there, it was like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning because I was up, I was pacing, I was trying to get myself settled down. And so I put it up there and I told my friends, don't call me, don't send anybody to my house, don't try to find somebody and send them to my house, don't call my parents, don't do any of that. Well, all of my friends who live in different parts of the country did all of those things. And one of them who is extremely resourceful, went so far as to find somebody who she knew here in Columbus, who we both knew, and then sent her to my house. And then one of my other friends sent a copy of what I posted to my mother. And some months later, I'm visiting my parents, and I see my mother coming to me with a copy of the post. And she's like, I just really need you to help me understand. Why are you doing this? I'm afraid somebody's going to see what you're doing, and they're going to take advantage of you. I'm really, really concerned. And so what I tried to explain to my friends who were just distraught about what I'd posted was I do everything deliberately. I don't just throw something out there. I just don't say something. I look for leading, if you will, to do what I'm going to do. And the thing that I kept trying to get them to understand was when I posted what I was going through at 1 a.m. on Facebook, I had somebody who we all know, who we all went to school with, send me a message, DM me and say, thank you for putting that up there because this is the way that I was feeling. Now, I don't think those things happen by accident. And I'd had that happen to me enough times before where I would write something and publish it or put something out there and somebody would reach out to me and oftentimes I didn't even know them. And they were like, thank you for putting this up there because this is what I was thinking about. But they just did not understand that. And I told them, I said, I don't do this for me. Because by the time I have ground my way through writing a story or writing an article, I have processed and processed and processed to get that article out there. So by the time I put something out there, I've already dealt with whatever I'm struggling with. I'm doing it for the person who sent me a DM saying, thank you for putting it up there because this is where I was when I read that. Because that tells them they're not by themselves. But they still don't understand it, and that's okay.
No, but that's one amazing thing, though, or one good thing, I'll say, in regards to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know I've even looked on there and you see something and it just speaks to you. And you go, I needed that today, right? So very good. Yes. Anybody else to additional on? All right. So I'm going to turn to the audience. Do we have any questions that you might have? And I'll come over here. I'll do, and I know you guys remember from the last time, the Phil Donahue thing. All right.
I just wanted to know if anyone had any strong beliefs or opinions about individuals reaching out to artificial intelligence or ChatGPT and these things like this to have someone to talk to about mental health and crisis.
I'd like to. Oh, okay. If I can respond to that. Since we staff 988 and NetCare is the biggest, we answer more 988 texts than any other agency in Ohio. We do about 63% of all the Ohio texts and overall about 4% of all the 988 texts in the nation. One thing that we really, really don't want to do is come across as a chat GPT because we know that people who have reached out to chat GPT and AI have been led astray because not only is artificial intelligence biased and just based on the input, it's not a real person. And so we try really, really hard. People will ask us, are you real? And it's like, yeah, I'm real. ChatGPT can be very helpful in scheduling and kind of financial, kind of fiscal management in a nonprofit. But at NetCare, we do not permit it to be in anything that's facing the public or in any interactions directly. So.
I have a friend who's neurodivergent, and we do a podcast together called Resilience 2.0. And last week, he pulled up an AI, I don't even know what to call it, but who they were showing me these conversations. And I was just like, but this is not real. And the last thing that someone who is struggling in crisis, and especially if you are struggling with a delusion or you're hearing whatever, the last thing you need is something that is not real. And we thrive on connection. And so I had to tell him, I'm like, you have got to turn that off because this is not real. And I am not dealing with anything that is not real, meaning connection. And it's alarming to me because it seems so real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good question. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Questions or comments or, maybe your own experience? Oh, coming over here.
Hello. I just really want to say thank you for being vulnerable enough to share your stories with us and your professions with us, because I'm sure at some point in all of our lives we can relate to something that you've all have shared, whether it's personally or with a family member or a friend who has experienced that. Me, myself, I had a very bad postpartum. I didn't know until I had my first kid at 20 years old. So I can definitely appreciate the stories of recognizing when depression, you didn't realize it until you realized it, right? And being a mom, my heart will forever go out with you because I have 3 sons and I couldn't imagine your heartache every day. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions? No one? Your last chance. All right. Yes.
Is it possible? Can I ask one question?
Yes, you may. This is your opportunity right now. I know you're waiting.
This is something that has really become extremely important to me because in the aftermath of the suicide, there are people who are left behind. And so I have a question for everybody. You don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. But how many people here know someone who has died by suicide? Okay. So a few years ago, when there were a series of celebrity, high-profile deaths by suicide, and when Stephen Twitch, or Boss, Ellen's former DJ, died by suicide, I just thought, okay, if I wait long enough, somebody is going to go and they're going to ask this question. And the question is, and it's a fair question, it's a legitimate, fair question. What are the signs? They'll come to an organization like NetCare, they'll come to NAMI, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and they will say, well, what are the signs? And it's a fair question. We have to educate ourselves about what are the signs. But then you have to, I think about somebody like me. I've been running with this for a long time. I've navigated some of this surprisingly, mostly on my own for a really long time. And I am expert at hiding in plain sight. So unless you really know me, unless you know the types of things that will show my mental health state, what is it that would give me away every single time, you may not know what is happening inside of me. And when you ask the question, what are the signs, that then presupposes that I should have known something. That was my mother, that was my father, that was my brother, my sister, my best friend, my favorite aunt, that I should have known. And then it gets to if only. If only. If only I hadn't stayed at work too long. If only I hadn't gone shoe shopping. If only. And what I want to say to people is that it is hard enough to carry your grief. Grief is hard to carry. Don't carry guilt based upon this was my child. I should have known. I carried them for 9 months. This is my child. I should have known. Because the truth is, and I can only speak for myself because I am not a clinician, having suicidal thoughts, wanting to die, does not mean that I really, really want to die. What I want is peace of mind. What I want is to cut off the pain that comes with living with a mental health condition. The pain and the chaos that can come when you are battling back suicidal thinking. That is what I want. And so don't carry that guilt. Let that go, because your grief is hard enough to carry. The other thing is this: suicide prevention programs work. They absolutely, positively work. But the thing that I think you have to think about, if you can, if you've never had struggled or dealt with suicidal thinking, there comes that moment where you stand on that line. I stand on that line. I've gotten past all of the rational, all of the suicide prevention, all of everything that I know. And I find myself standing on that line between life and death. There's that line. It's there. Am I going to step over today? Is that what I'm going to do? Or am I going to stay on the other side? That is what is happening with loved ones and people who are like me. And I may not be giving off a lot of signs. You may not know. That's why I have to have a therapist who can see like right through me. Because otherwise, I can go to therapy, I can play around with it, I've been long enough, and if I know that I can hide from you, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I just wanted to say that.
With my granddaughter, after her, like, dealing with my son all those years and keeping it a secret for him, in our house, we've normalized talking about it. If she's having a bad day, listen, she can come and tell me she's having a bad day. Right. If she knows she's getting ready to go in that deep depression, she will tell me, Mama, I'm feeling it, I'm feeling really down today. So, I'll make her come out of her room and we'll watch a movie or something. We just watched Conjuring. But yeah, I learned to normalize talking about it. It's not okay to hold it in. Right. And she held it in for a long time because I'm not a crier. I always thought I had to stay strong for my kids and my grandkids. So I never cry in front of them. But that was not a good thing because she thought she needed to be like me. Mm-hmm. And she held it in for probably 2 years. And then she did an interview with Spectrum about losing her father. And the next day, she just was in her room screaming and crying, throwing up. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? She didn't even know. But what it was she was holding it in for so long. And after she talked about it, it kind of made her explode. And I had to explain to her, listen, you got to tell me what you feel. And, if you're feeling it, tell me about it. Tell somebody about it. And I think that's helped a lot. And I had to also tell her how I handle my grief is not the right way. So, and I can admit that I need to cry, but I'm that strong mom, so I don't, but I'm trying to do better.
Last words from either of you two.
I just appreciate that we've been able to spend some time together and talk about this and keep talking.
I agree. The only thing I was going to add earlier to normalizing it and talking about it is education. And so doing things like this is exactly the goal. And so thank you all so much for being here.
All right. Well, I guess we are, not unless we have any, oh, there we go. Okay.
I just want to say that in addition to people not feeling grief when somebody they are close to commits suicide, I think it's equally as important to say that they shouldn't also be blaming that person,
Right.
which I've seen firsthand, like thinking that person was selfish and took the easy way out, and that kind of train of thought really bothers me, and I think like even when it comes to life insurance, like if the person committed suicide, their family's not going to get anything because they don't even consider it an illness. It was a choice that that person made to kill themselves. That's how it's viewed in our and I think that needs to change. And I think the only way that's going to change is for people like you that are coming out and sharing your story. So I want to thank you for that.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Well, I would like to truly thank the panelists, right? If we could give them a round of applause, please. We want to thank you for your vulnerability, your wisdom, compassion, right? And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Mental health and grief is deeply personal, but it doesn't have to be faced alone. Healing begins when we talk, listen, and care for one another. So on behalf of the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas General Division, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, we'd like to thank all of you for being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.